Hello, my name is Dietrich, and I work on the IPFS project at Protocol Labs, and I've been hacking on browsers for a long time. Today I'm going to talk to you about a couple of different experiments, some of the experiences I've had building browsers, and some of the challenges that we have in breaking out of current patterns and making the browsers that we all need. Browsers today look a lot like this, and they have for a really long time. Old, tired metaphors, things that don't really meet my needs, how I want to use the web, making the web be where I need to be, do the things that I need it to do, and use it in the way that feels most comfortable to me. I first started hacking on web things around 2005. I found this service called Delicious that you may have heard of. It allowed you to save your bookmarks and tag them to what was not yet called cloud services. I wrote a Firefox extension that allowed you to merge those into your local bookmark store, which got me into Firefox itself, working on the browser in the release of Firefox 2, 2006, implemented session restore, which meant that the browser actually remembered the things that you did, when you did it, how you did it, restored things like lost blog posts, and many other things as well. 2008, we gave the browser a memory, or almost infinite memory. It could only remember browser web pages for about 7 days before this work. After this, basically as long as you want it to. I've had mine set to 10,000 for many, many years. Also, all that data sitting around gave us the ability to do interesting things like the awesome bar, which let us build a lot of smarts into how we recall and take you back to the places you've been before. 2011. One of the biggest departures in browser user interface was Panorama, Tab Candy. Worked with a team at Firefox to be able to land this feature, which reimagined, totally broke us out of that metaphor, tabs inside windows, and gave us groups. Still tab-like, but it hid things like the tab bar, which was really interesting, and gave us a different way of thinking about the collections of places we've been. Ultimately was removed, though. 2012, landed Jetpack with a bunch of other people working to make it really, really easy to be able to make the browser do what we want it to do all the time. One of those experiments I did was called Peek, which allowed you to be able to pop up transient browser windows. There's a bunch of websites that I used, not all the time, and I didn't want to have them taking up tab space. Just wanted to briefly look at them every now and then. Things like translators or currency converters or timers, things like this. Sometimes just even music player, you could be able to have it be persistent. Those APIs no longer exist. 2015. Started working on Firefox OS, reimagining what the browser-based OS would look like on mobile. A bunch of interesting experiments happened here over those years. Ultimately, the OS did not last, but some of the ideas did, and we're seeing them emerge in mobile operating systems today, both Android and iOS. 2017. All right. Wrote a blog post about how I had 1,691 tabs and Firefox could load it really, 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 really fast. Is that enabling? Is that helping? I'm not sure. 2018. Finally started to explore. Maybe we're constrained not by visual design and user experience, but maybe those things are constrained by the protocols that we build on, where the browser has maybe not nearly as much power as the people that are serving content to it. You have the ability to choose what web pages you go to, but the pages themselves have all the power about what you're able to do there. Immediately met these folks from IPFS Project who built IPFS on top of the libdweb experimental APIs that we added to Firefox extensions. Those APIs never actually landed because as of today, we're still highly constrained by the limits of HTTP. 2020. Joined the IPFS project. Actually, I started working on bringing alternative protocols to the browser. Did some work looking at how browsers implement security UI. What would it look like if things were different, if we had non-HTTP protocols? People in the indie web community talk a lot about not being protocol focused and being end user focused. This was really an experiment in the opposite end of that, thinking that browsers today are highly constrained by the protocol capabilities and constraints. So what would happen if we changed the protocol? What new superpowers does that give us? 2021, Brave, first browser that integrated IPFS, non-HTTP protocol, full node, but we're still in early days. The browser still pretty much looks like this. So how do we break out of it? How do we move past these constraints, these old metaphors of yesteryear that have been around for, well, tabs maybe nearly coming on 20 years, maybe more. I'm not exactly sure what comes next, but I have some things that I think are very important to me in what I want in a browser. And it's a short list, but it lets us do some things that I think are fun and interesting. So one of those is being task-oriented, being able to think about what you want to do with the web based on the task, the context of the task you're trying to achieve, as opposed to just the protocol underlying it and the single metaphor of a tab inside of a browser window. Transient versus persistent user interface modes. This is the peak experiment, was really learning about the ways that I use things transiently. Mobile browsers, and actually I've been doing this for a while, the way that web views were integrated into iOS at first as a transient web view. Very interesting, very useful. An extensible extensibility model. Right now, the extensibility models inside browsers are highly constrained. You cannot do anything with user interface. There are some security reasons for this, but it shouldn't absolutely constrain the amount of creativity that we can have in alternative user interfaces for browsers. Non-HTTP protocols, as I mentioned before, I do believe that the creative space that we have in browsers today is highly constrained by the fact that there are no other protocols that we're allowed to use for the most part. Hardware capabilities, Firefox OS and a bunch of other mobile OSs now are exposing more. Very interesting blog post from the Chrome team in February, which basically unlocked things like NFC and USB for web pages. And finally, contextual privacy and security models. The security model that we have today, SSL, assumes a bit of, assumes that all of these SSL certificates are being issued to actual research legitimate companies. It's kind of the kernel of the trust model there. However, that is not the case any longer. We need security models that meet the needs of many billions of people using the web today. This is the short list of things that I wish that we had in browsers today, and I'm experimenting, and many others are, that you'll hear from today at this event. Thanks so much for hosting it and giving me a chance to speak. Bye-bye.